Ever get that feeling? Like
Yeah.
where it seems like all these big, powerful forces are just kind of running things,
Yeah.
you know?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, that's exactly where we're headed today. We're getting deep into this rally that happened recently in Tempe, Arizona. Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, they teamed up for this thing. It was a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it really was. And what really jumps out at you from the get-go is the aim of it. It was,
Yeah.
very clearly framed as this sort of head-on challenge to people like Donald Trump, Elon Musk. They even called them out as oligarchs, no less.
Right. So in this deep dive, we're really going to try to get to the heart of this rally.
Yeah.
What were the main messages? What's the bigger context here? We've got some great news reports that give us a real inside look at what went down. So we're going to break down the most important stuff for you, the listener.
Exactly. We're going to unpack this whole concept of oligarchy as it was presented at the rally. We'll look at the concerns about income and wealth inequality, which, it's a hot topic. And then what's really interesting is there was even criticism of both major political parties. So we'll be diving into the specific things that Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez, they said and did.
All right, so let's jump right into this Fighting Oligarchy tour. That's a pretty in-your-face name. What was the thinking behind that?
The name itself is a statement. They wanted to challenge figures like Trump and Musk, but also other big-name billionaires like Bezos and Zuckerberg. And they were very direct about it. They said these individuals are taking a wrecking ball to our country.
Wow.
Wow.
Not exactly mincing words. And AOC, she really didn't hold back either. She flat out said, we are witnessing an oligarchy in America.
Yeah.
And that Democrats, they need to fight harder.
Yeah.
That's a pretty direct challenge, not just to, the other side, but to her own party as well.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so interesting. She was critical of Republicans, but she also took a swipe at her own party. We need a Democratic Party that fights harder for us, too. It suggests there's a kind of discontent there with the way things are going.
Yeah, I see what you mean. What do you think it means when someone like her, someone pretty high profile, publicly criticizes her own party like that? What's the message there?
I think it shows there's a feeling that things need to change. It's not enough to just go with the flow.
Right, right. Now, Sanders, he agreed that these so-called oligarchs are really powerful, but he also said that he's convinced that they can be defeated. That's a message of hope, isn't it? Like, things can change.
Absolutely. He's not saying it's easy, but he's saying it's possible. He's saying people can make a difference.
Okay, so let's talk about what they actually want people to do. AOC was pretty clear about who she wants out of office.
Yeah, she said, throw these bums out, which, pretty strong language, right? But what's interesting is how she was specific about it. It wasn't just a blanket statement. She praised some of the Arizona Democrats, like Gallego, Kelly, Ansari, and Stanton. But then she said people should vote out Rep. David Schweikert in 2026.
Oh, interesting.
So she's trying to get people to support certain Democrats and oppose others. It's a strategy.
Yeah, yeah. And she even mentioned how Senator Sinema was replaced.
Yeah.
That was a pretty big change in Arizona politics.
Right. And she specifically said that she was replaced with one who will, as in one who will fight for the people.
Gotcha. So she's basically saying that voters, they have the power to make a difference.
Exactly. They can hold their representatives accountable.
Now, Sanders, he really focused on the economic side of things, right?
Right.
The whole income and wealth inequality issue.
Right. He talked about the need for everyone to have a decent standard of living. And he even asked the crowd, about living paycheck to paycheck, about how tough it is to afford health care. He was trying to connect with people's everyday struggles.
Yeah. And then he said, Trump and his billionaire friends have never, ever had it so good. Working families are struggling. That really sums up their main argument about this whole oligarchy thing, doesn't it?
It does. He's saying that the system is rigged in favor of the wealthy and ordinary people are paying the price.
Right. And then there was that pretty unique metaphor he used. He talked about 9/11s and CEOs of major corporations who are robbing us. And then he clarified that he was talking about 7-Eleven stores.
Yeah.
So what did you make of that comparison?
Well, it's definitely unusual.
Yeah.
It's like he's trying to draw a parallel between this national tragedy and the feeling of being taken advantage of financially, on a daily basis. The comparison might seem a bit off, but I think he's trying to say that this corporate greed has a real impact on people's lives. And the 7-Eleven reference, I think he's using that as an example of something that happens every day where people feel like they're getting ripped off.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a pretty memorable way to make his point, that's for sure. Did the news report say anything about how the crowd reacted to that?
I don't think they specifically mentioned that part. but it definitely stood out.
It did.
Yeah.
Now, AOC, she seemed to be taking a different approach. It's like she was trying to build a broader coalition.
Mm-hmm.
She said that everyone's welcome, no matter their background or if they disagree on some things, as long as they're willing to fight for someone you don't know. That seems like a big part of their strategy, bringing people together.
Absolutely. It's a message of unity. She's saying we need to put aside our differences and work together to solve these big problems.
So this rally, it didn't just come out of nowhere. What was the political climate like in Arizona at the time?
Well, it was a pretty busy time for Arizona Democrats. Like Kelly, Gallego, Ansari, and Stanton, they were all holding town halls around the same time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it seems like they were trying to make the most of the situation, connect with voters, build some momentum.
Okay. And then there was that whole thing about people being frustrated with the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. Supposedly, it was impacting federal employees, and it was connected to Trump and Musk.
Yeah, that was a big local issue. And there was a poll by Quinnipiac that showed a lot of people disapproved of Musk and how DOGE was being handled. So it seems like that was a real point of contention for a lot of voters in the area.
And then there were also these protests and an empty chair town hall organized by Democratic activists, and they were targeting Republican members of Congress. That seems pretty strategic.
Yeah, it's about keeping the pressure on, holding those elected officials accountable.
And then, on the same day as this rally, President Trump signed an executive order to dismantle the Department of Education. That must have added to the tension.
Oh, definitely. And the Arizona Education Association president, she was at the rally, and she really made a point of connecting Trump's actions to everything Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez were talking about.
I see.
She said they need to defend our public education system. So it was like a real-life example of what they were rallying against.
It's always interesting to hear what the people who actually attended these events have to say.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of the perspectives we heard from the folks who showed up in Tempe?
Well, one thing that stood out was that some people felt like neither of the major political parties represented them. There were folks like Rachel Bergeron and Gerard Goubache. They're part of the Democratic Socialists of America. And they said they only registered as Democrats so they could vote in the primaries.
Wow.
Yeah, they don't really identify with the Democratic Party as a whole, which, says something about how people are feeling about the current political system.
No kidding.
And Goubache said something about the selling out of the public sector for the sake of the oligarchs, which, goes back to that central theme of the rally.
Totally. It's like people are feeling like the system isn't working for them, that it's rigged in favor of the wealthy and powerful.
Exactly. And there's this feeling that it's getting worse, that the influence of these big corporations is growing.
Then there was Lindsay Begay. She called Sanders the best president we never had, and she said that the major parties are the same wings on the same bird. I mean, that's a pretty harsh assessment.
It is. She's basically saying that there's no real difference between the two parties, that they're both part of the same broken system.
And then there was Jimmy Killoran. He called for pushback from both sides against Trump's executive orders. It sounds like people want more accountability from their leaders, no matter what party they belong to.
Exactly. It's not just about being a Democrat or a Republican. It's about holding those in power responsible for their actions.
So this Fighting Oligarchy tour, it sounds like it was more than just a one-off event.
Right. They had more rallies planned in Colorado and Tucson, Arizona, and over 10,000 people showed up at the Tempe rally, so it seems like their message is resonating with a lot of people.
All right, so to sum it all up for you, the listener, this deep dive into the Tempe rally shows that Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez are really concerned about this idea of an oligarchy in America. They're pushing for greater economic equality, and they're not afraid to criticize both Democrats and Republicans. And all of this is happening against a very specific political backdrop in Arizona, with local issues and national events all playing a role.
Right. You've heard about the concerns people have, why they decided to go to this rally, and what they hope to achieve. It's a really interesting snapshot of what's going on in the country right now.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on. Given all the different viewpoints we heard at this rally and all the criticism of both parties, what does this tell you about the state of politics in America today? What does it say about how people are engaging with the political system? And what does it mean for the future? Something to really think about.
Definitely. It's a lot to unpack.
It is.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for being here.
See you next time.
See ya.